You can have the most nutrient-dense food on the planet grown in your own house. The evolution of the sprout is you start with one broccoli seed. It sprouts. Sprouting can happen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in almost any environment. People will ask me, where do I get my omega-3s? Right? And I say, flax and chia for ALA, and nori and wakame for EPA and DHA. If I know that I'm eating broccoli sprouts every day, I feel that they are protecting me from cancer, they're protecting me from heart disease, they're helping to regulate my insulin levels, and they are a natural detoxifier.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Real Life Health Show. I'm so excited about my next guest. He's a return guest. His name's Doug Evans. Doug, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
I am the best ever, Paul. You know, we go back 25 years. So, you know, I met you at the Big Apple Vegetarian Society on the Lower East Side on the East Village in 1999. And you had a raw food restaurant in Tribeca called Fourth Dimension.
Yes. And it's, of all the people you and I knew back then doing this, I think there aren't many hanging in there that are still eating even the slightest bit raw, let alone, I mean, I'm all raw. I don't know if you're 100% raw, are you?
Yeah, I'm all raw. I think Doug Graham is still on the train.
Doug Graham, yes. And a few people, you know, I speak to Fred Bishy all the time, and he's just turned 96.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, man, when I first went to Hippocrates Health Institute at 19 years old, I was first introduced to sprouts, living foods. Doug, you're the sprout man. You know, ever since, sadly, what happened to Steve Meyerowitz, it was very sad. But you're the sprout man now, or the sprout boy, whatever you want to call it. You're the sprout king now.
Yeah.
And, you know, you got a sprouting book. And, you know, Hippocrates Health Institute taught me the difference between raw food and living food. And I would like you to explain to the audience what's the
Yeah.
difference between raw food and living food.
Well, I'll do a distinction between raw food, living food, and whole food. Right? A
Okay.
lot of people think they're eating whole food when they're eating minimally processed food, but it's still cooked, right? It could still have salts and oils and preservatives, and it's not raw. Like whole food can be meat, it could be other things. So that's the whole food. Raw food could also be raw meat and other things. So I talk about raw plant-based or raw vegan, right? And raw vegan, and I still identify myself as raw vegan, even though I prefer living foods. But raw food in the plant world, you know, could be lettuce, could be fruit, but all things that are separated from the source, the life force. So it's almost like, you know, you cut the head off, you grab an apple, you grab a leaf, you know, it's raw, it's uncooked, right? It's but as soon as you cut it off from the life force, it begins to decay, to die, and it's shifting. Living foods, in particular sprouts and grasses, you are consuming a sprout more than a grass because the grass you're cutting above the fold. A sprout, you get to eat a sprout. You're eating the root, the shoot, the endosperm, the embryo, the testa. You're eating the entire living organism that's enzymatically alive and electrically alive. So it's something that is unknown to most of the living population of human animals are not eating living foods ever, ever. And if you think about lettuce, the average leaf of lettuce is traveling 2,000 miles, you know, which could take a week or 2 weeks till it gets to the grocery store. And then in the grocery store, it could sit on the shelf for another weeks at a time. And certain phytonutrients, certain vitamins decay and degrade over that period of time. So with sprouts, this is the most amazing thing. So, what if I told you that you can have the most nutrient dense food on the planet grown in your own house, right? In small 1 cubic foot or less amount of space, right? For under $1 a serving, and you're getting food that is 20 to 100 times the nutrient density of the comparable to their mature vegetable counterparts, right? So that is the miracle of sprouting. And for me, I started to eat sprouts before I even met you in New York because they were sold at Lifetime Market. They were at the Union Square Farmers Market in New York City, and they were the greenest, freshest things. So even though I was still eating processed food at the time, when I saw sprouts and when I saw wheatgrass, I was extremely interested and intrigued. And I remember from uh, from uh, uh, I'm thinking the name of from Perfect Foods, I was getting trays of wheatgrass delivered to my house. I had a little cranker wheatgrass juicer. And, the obvious thing that you have people today that are eating meat. And then you have people that are eating grass fed meat, right? And when I say to them, okay, grass fed, well, where's the cow getting the protein from that you are so obsessed with? And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. The cow is getting the protein from the grass. So evidently, a cow that's consuming just grass is getting all of the essential amino acids, all of the phytonutrients from green grass. And I remember going into Lifetime Market and they closed at 9 o'clock. I got there at 8 o'clock and I'd like some wheatgrass. And they said, oh no, we've already cleaned the juicer. And I was like, but you're not closed yet. They go, well, that's just our closing procedure. So at the time, this is 25 years ago, I was wild. I reached over and grabbed a handful of the wheatgrass and I chewed it and I chewed it and I chewed it and I got out every water molecule from the cytoplasm and I left something that was drier than any juicer on the market because I used my molars to masticate and get the juice from it. And so that's a whole other, story that we could talk about. And I'm going to go there for a second. People saying, oh, wow, juice, but it has no fiber. And first of all, juice does have soluble fiber, which actually is a prebiotic. But you're getting the goodness and you're extracting everything from the produce, whether it's kale or romaine or spinach, you're getting the nutrients without the insoluble fiber, which makes it very palatable and very possible to absorb and to digest. So of course we need fiber to have a good, healthy movement, but it's very easy for people to eat fruit, right? Because fruit's sweet. It's very easy to eat fruit. You have exotic fruit growing on your land. It's amazing. Vegetables, without oil, without salt, without cooking them, are harder for people to eat. So juicing them is a great way of getting some of the phytonutrient content from the vegetables. Sprouts are a whole different story. because when you're growing the sprout, and by the way, there's a difference between a living sprout and hydroponic, right? Because when you're growing the sprout, you take the seed, you soak the seed, it germinates, you rinse it twice a day, and in 7 days or less, you have edible living sprouts, right? No soil, no sunshine, no fertilizer. Hydroponically grown is post the 7 days when they're growing it predominantly in plastic and they're using minerals as fertilizer to continue the growth. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's different because the sprout is growing without the soil and without the fertilizer because nature has embedded into that seed, into the endosperm, the minerals from the soil of the original plant, right? So it's really nuanced, but since I obsess over this every day, it's very clear that when someone says, "Oh, well, I don't like to grow in a jar because there's no soil." I was like, "What are you talking about?" There was soil in the plant. So the evolution of the sprout is you start with one broccoli seed. It sprouts. If you let it grow, it turns into a microgreen. And then it needs soil, it needs fertilizer, but then it needs to be transferred outside or into a raised bed or into a garden. And then you water it, you give it sunshine, preferably other than artificial light, and then it grows, and then it becomes a mature broccoli plant. And then if you let it grow further, the mature broccoli plant will flower. And when it has the plant buds, is the only other time that it has plant stem cells. So you have the plant stem cells at two phases. Number one, at the sprouting stage, and number two, at the plant bud stage. So the next step is when it flowers. If you let it continue to flower, the broccoli, which is a vegetable, will fruit and it will grow pods. And within those pods will be infinite number of seeds. So the seeds got their minerals and they got their nutrients from the carbon in the atmosphere, the oxygen, the minerals in the soil, and from the water. And then those seeds can either go planted again to continue this cycle of life, or we can take those seeds and sprout them in a jar and take the gift, the carry forward of the plant forward, sprout those, and get these incredible benefits where sprouting can happen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in almost any environment. And even they're growing sprouts on the International Space Station. So even in other atmospheres, the sprouts are growing.
Well, it's my goal to have the most effective, efficient diet as possible for my body to give it the best chance it can have. And through growing my own food, I've learned how bad the food that the average person gets in the supermarket is. Growing my own fruit, you don't know how bad it is in the supermarket until you grow your own, and it's like, wait a second, they pick
Right.
it so green and so unripe. Same thing, growing vegetables, the quality of it versus getting it from the store for the reasons you said. They have to pick them at a certain time and get them to the market and travel with them and so on. Tremendous difference, tremendous difference. And I've identified some things that will make up the best diet for everyone. And like you just said to me a little while ago, you don't know why people aren't doing sprouts. It's like crazy. You and I growing up, uh, the only thing you and I growing up, New York, same time. You grew up in Northeast, right?
Yeah, I grew up in New York City.
Okay, so the same time, you know as well as I do, growing up, wheatgrass caught on finally, and I used to go on somewhere on 23rd Street and get an ounce of wheatgrass for $2. That's how much it used to be, and then it went up to
Yeah,
3. 1 ounce, 1 ounce. And then the only time you and I heard of sprouts as little kids was alfalfa sprouts in
yeah,
Pathmark or something, right? And then as we started to explore all the other options, we started to realize there are all these other sprouts, and it's amazing. So I used to go with wild man Steve Brill to Central Park and pick wild edible foods.
exactly.
Yeah, so that's another powerhouse that people have an option to learn and explore. Those are really amazing superfoods with the wild foods. So sprouts and wild foods. Now I haven't explored the wild food since I left hanging out with Steve Brill. There's a guy down here named Green Dean that does it. But besides the sprouts in your diet, do you use any wild foods at all?
It's an interesting, I love wild foods. I live in the desert, which is also, it's an environmental desert and it's a food desert. So the wild foods here is rather limited. I love wild food. Um, when I was living in New York, in the first week of July, I recall eating an entire week of just mulberries that I was foraging from about 8 different trees, in secret areas that it was me and the birds, and there
Yeah,
was enough abundance, to get them, but I would just eat them. So that was the level of foraging. You know, in New York, I was a little reticent between the animals and feces and the rats and the poisons and the spraying, but I felt that they weren't spraying the mulberry trees, that they were deep rooted, getting the soil. So that was my extent of the foraging. But otherwise, like I've been I've been a entrepreneur, business person, artist. I'm really not like the hippie, green guy. Like I didn't grow up with parents who were giving me sprouts.
yeah,
The day before I met you, I remember having a double quarter pounder with cheese, 9-piece chicken McNugget, large fries, vanilla shake, apple pie, hot fudge sundae at McDonald's. Like that's how I grew up. But since then, the last quarter century, I've been eating healthy, but I'm still not this hippie guy.
weren't they calling you back then when you first were like raw CEO or something like that?
Yeah, because I was the only CEO of a large enterprise that was also raw vegan.
Yeah, yeah. And it's amazing. And so the other thing now, I want to hear about your daily diet to show people what's possible. And first of all, do you get your blood tested at all or not really?
I haven't been to the doctor in probably 5 years. So no doctors, no blood work. I did do the last time I did the test, I checked everything, and the lines were I was just so in the middle. But the most important thing for me is how do you feel, right? How strong are your nails? Is my hair staying, dark and full? And what's my strength? Right? So these are the measurements that I view, and I can do 300 push-ups a day, 100,000 a year. I could run 5K, 10K, 15K, off of the bench, but I do it on a regular basis. I do pull-ups. I do my stretching. I do my yoga, and I right now I never valued sleep, but now I'm cognizant of it. And although I don't like the wearing electronics, I love my Whoop, and I'm not paid to say this, but I really love my Whoop because it helps me go to sleep earlier, and it helps me know my recovery rate where because I can be imbalanced, right? I have a baby, I have a wife, I've got, companies, I'm juggling. So this helps me have a level of perspective.
Sure. And how many hours a night do you get sleep?
My goal would be 8. I would say if we were to look at my sleep history, it's probably averaging 6.
Okay. And how tall and how much are you and how much do you weigh?
I am like 5'10", 5'10", 5'10" and a half, and I weigh right now 154 pounds as of this morning.
So 154 pounds. Give us an example because everyone says, where do you get your protein? How can you get your calories and so on? Give us an example of your average diet. And I know there are certain days it might be different, but give us your example, what you eat, how often, and what.
I begin eating on a normal day around noon, and seasons change, but it's fall already, but I'm still I've been traveling a lot, so I'm still in the mindset of summer. But I would eat a whole watermelon, and it could be a 20-pound watermelon, right? So if you remove the rind, it could be, you know, 12 pounds of flesh of watermelon, which sounds like an insane amount. And that'll be my lunch and cover me through mostly water weight, by the way, but it will cover me through 5 o'clock or so. And then between 5 and 6:30, I will eat a lot of sprouts. I'll have a cup of sprouted green peas, a cup of sprouted garbanzo beans, a cup of sprouted lentils, and then I'll make a big salad using alfalfa sprouts, lentil sprouts, broccoli sprouts, and then I make a dressing using brine from pickles or fermented pickles, not acidified pickles, fermented pickles or fermented sauerkraut, fermented cabbage, with very little amount of tahini, probably 1 tablespoon of tahini. Just, get a little fat. There's a tiny bit of fat in there. And then I will add wakame or nori seaweed into it. And then I'll actually add some of the sauerkraut into the salad and I'll eat that. And depending on how um, energetic I am, whether I feel like I had a high action day or a low action day, I could then eat between 2 and 12 big, fresh, wet medjool dates.
Okay. Wow. So let me ask you this, because the other thing I was going to ask is and say that I feel is part of the ideal diet is fermented foods. I am personally am not a fan of fermented drinks, but I'm a fan of fermented foods, sauerkraut and kimchi, and pickles and other pickled vegetables. Do you ferment your own foods or do you buy those foods?
I ferment my own sauerkraut and I buy my pickles in New York City. And I would like to do them on my own. It's pretty easy. Just with my schedule, I have not prioritized that. And I now am creating in my food lab my fermentation station, my dehydration station, and I'm getting a Harvest Right medium size freeze dryer, predominantly for snacks. I have a 2-year-old and she goes to parties, and I want to, basically go to the parties, hide all of the junk food, and just generously give out copious amounts of freeze dried fruits, and things that they can eat because it's they like it as much. It's just very expensive, to buy it. You buy a big bag. There's 1 ounce of freeze dried fruit in it, and you're paying $5. So I figured I'll go buy bulk and freeze dry it ourselves, and then we can share it.
Okay, great. So the other thing I was going to mention that I feel is part of the ideal diet is sea vegetables, and you already mentioned that you add these to your diet on a regular basis. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you if you go under the ocean and do you get your own vegetables, but I'm going to say, tell everybody about the amazing benefit of sea vegetables. They're like wild foods under the ground, under the ocean. They're amazing.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that people will ask me, where do I get my omega 3s, right? And I say flax and chia for ALA and nori and wakame for EPA and DHA. And that's it. Like, there a lot of people are supplementing omega 3s using fish oils, or krill, which are predominantly rancid. Like, if you ever smell them, they're rancid. And if you peel back the onion and you go, where is this omega 3s coming from in these supplements and in the fish oil? Where does the fish get its omega 3? It's from eating algae. So, so you can bypass the fish, right? And also, fish are really, top of the food chain. So, the bigger the fish, the more it's been consuming concentrated levels of microplastics, heavy metals, pesticides, and pollution. So, even though the oceans aren't as clean as they used to be, the seaweed is probably the least benign from an accumulation of toxicity.
Absolutely. So yes, I was going to ask you with the toxicity of the oceans and where the sea vegetables come from. Tell us, do you specifically get your sea vegetables from Atlantic, Pacific, oceans? And are you concerned at all, or do you research at all? Well, how is it getting at all into the sea vegetables, toxins from
I
the ocean?
mean, the answer is I get them from Atlantic and Pacific. I prefer not to get them from China, right? So I prefer domestic, most domestic everything, even though um, they're probably good sources in other places. From a level of not driving myself crazy, I think the body is very well efficient in detoxification. And the broccoli sprouts open the detoxifying pathways, the natural detoxifying pathways, due to the sulforaphane, which is an isothiocyanate that specifically cleanses, the body. So for me, I am not just sitting here with nothing to do, pondering what I'm going to eat. So I'm living my life and I'm making sure that I'm consuming. My framework is, if I know that I'm eating broccoli sprouts every day, I feel that they are protecting me from cancer. They're protecting me from heart disease. They're helping to regulate my insulin levels. And they are a natural detoxifier. Further, people, when you and I were going through the early stages, people would do various levels of chelation in order to get out heavy metals. My research has come to broccoli sprouts as the ultimate natural detoxifier. Um, and if you want, you can also have cilantro. You could also have cilantro sprouts, as well. But I think broccoli sprouts, is the fastest, easiest, most affordable way to ensure that you're getting natural detoxification going on in the body.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I just thought of a question just now. I know, they get sea vegetables from the ocean, but do they have sea vegetable farms where they're growing them in like
They
tanks? You
they
don't
they
know.
do. They do. Like everything they're farming. I think that I would rather go with wildly harvested than farmed.
Sure. And
The
I
things
think
that I do, the things that do I would get farmed would be the microalgae, the spirulina and chlorella, because those being farmed or harvested in these bioreactors, the very algae is very sensitive, and go. Do you consume any algae?
I take astaxanthin on a daily basis. I think it's very helpful. I have in the past taken the E3 Live, but I don't do that on a regular basis. But the astaxanthin is what I do regularly.
What about spirulina or chlorella?
No, I don't.
Is there a reason?
No, no, not a reason. I know they're both powerhouses. I mean, I think if I was going to do algae, it would be the E3 Live algae. But I don't have anything against the spirulina chlorella. I think anything green like that is great, and you mix it in with in the algae form, it's wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say that the other superfood I think is like nature's multivitamin, which is a staple in my diet, and I love it, and I feel so much great that I could take it. I'm growing, out of all the fruit trees I grow, one of the most important trees that I grow is moringa,
Yeah.
and I
Moringa
love.
also
Yeah.
is an isothiocyanate and contains the glucosinolate glucoraphanin, which is the precursor to sulforaphane.
It's absolutely amazing, and the thing is, everything you and I just mentioned, you don't have to grow it yourself, you can get all these things, everything we mentioned, available quite easily these days, either through the internet or through, local stores, but a lot of these things, depending on the environment you live in, can be, grown or harvested locally, possibly, depending on your environment. Do you take moringa powder or moringa at all?
No, I would take the moringa if I didn't have access to the broccoli sprouts.
Sure,
But
sure.
since I have the since I have access to the broccoli sprouts, that's what I like to have. And the moringa leaves have high levels of antioxidants, the quercetin um, in it, and the seeds have the bioactive compounds and the antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory parts. So um, that is a good backup, and it's good to know that nature has in both environments, from a tropical environment as well as a more urban or rural, where the moringa tree wouldn't grow, broccoli does grow.
Sure. All right, we got about 10 more minutes. I know you got to go, and so do I. And but I want to ask you. So with your broccoli sprouts, soil versus a bottle, how do you prefer to do it? Do you do it both ways or one way over the other?
I mean, I have been very successful with broccoli sprouts in jars, and the research says that the peak levels of glucoraphanin is on day 3 of the sprouts. So the fact that the sprouts grow in 3 days in a jar effortlessly makes it the most ideal case. The thing that I would do in soil is sunflower sprouts do very well in soil because they take longer than the week. So the sunflower seed, if you just do it in water on a tray, um, they'll go, and then a certain point they'll just become limp because they need more fertilizer, they need more energy and fuel, and because in order to get a good harvest of the sunflower sprout, it takes 2 weeks or longer for it to grow into a hardy part. So sunflower pouts and also peas. If I love the sweet, tender pea microgreens, but the optimum level, especially if you want to consume the peas for the antihistamine benefits, the diamine oxidase, the DAO, that's growing them in 5 days. And
In a
so that
jar?
they don't need the soil, they don't need the tray, they don't need the coconut coir or any of those things. So, my only thing that I would grow in a tray would be with soil would be today wheatgrass and sunflower sprouts. Everything else I will grow in a jar.
Okay, what about buckwheat?
Buckwheat is very interesting. Buckwheat requires a certain level, of growth and minerals, and buckwheat generally does better on a tray. There was also research about buckwheat greens being potentially dangerous.
I know the stories and why Hippocrates dropped the juice, but they still have the sprouts.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that buckwheat is incredible. And if you sprout them in a few days, they're crunchy and they go in a jar and they're well. They don't have the same gelatinous impact. So my favorite tray method for the flax and for the chia
That was
is
my
using
next question.
terracotta. What's that?
Okay. That was my next question about those, but let's finish the buckwheat. So buckwheat greens, yes or no? Good for people or not? And you're undecided on it.
I mean, I don't have enough research, and when I don't have enough research and it's not conclusive, I tend to stay shy back because
Okay.
I don't feel I have a buckwheat deficiency at this
But
point.
you don't grow buckwheat microgreens
It's
yourself.
not it's not on my schedule
So the
right
only
now.
thing you're growing in soil is the sunflower, the wheatgrass, and
Sunflower and wheatgrass, that's it.
okay. And now the peas, sprouted pea, the bean in the jar versus the pea greens, nutrition wise, you think they're
The pea
different?
green has much more carbohydrates and more fiber in it, and the sprouted pea in the jar will have a higher protein content, but will also have a higher antihistamine, vector to it. So, depending if you can process the pea, which some people it's easier for them to digest it in the form of the tender greens than in the form of a crunchy sprout. But I like it in the crunchy sprout mode
And it's gonna
because
grow a tail just the same way it would like mung beans and everything else,
oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And what about the chia and the flax? You said that there's a tray method. So I read that in your book. You're not talking about soil. You're not
No.
talking about a bottle. What's a tray method?
Well, a tray method there was two. When I wrote the book, I was using seventh generation unbleached paper towels, and I would take the chia and the flax. I'd spread them out on a damp paper towel. Then I had a mister, and I would spray them and constantly spray them, and then they would burst and grow, and then you'd eat the shoot and the small leaf that was on it. Then I moved to, and this is kind of crazy, I moved to the chia pet strategy, where you would take the chia and the flax, you'd add water for like 15 minutes, and it would become gelatinous. And then you would take the terracotta sprouter or tray that would not be finished or glazed, just open terracotta, which is compressed earth that's baked in a kiln, and then soak that and then spread out the seeds on it and then continue to spray mist. And you can even leave that terracotta object in another tray so it would be wicking the water through it and then misting on top and spraying on the bottom. And then when you harvest it, you can peel it up and you get to eat the roots as well. And that's what I like. And you couldn't do that on the paper towel. You can't really do that in the soil. So I do it there.
How big do those sprouts grow, the chia and the flax?
About an inch to 2 inches max.
Is it worth it for people to do them?
Look, I think that the other alternative is to get a coffee grinder and just grind, the chia and flax into the seed if you're consuming it for the ALA omega 3s. If you go through the process of sprouting it, you're actually increasing the vitamin C by 300%. So there's other benefits, and it becomes infinitely more digestible and bioavailable when you think about how hard the seed coat is, the test on the seed. It's hard, right? So if you're not attuned to good digestion or chewing or masticating, it could go out the same way it came in.
Sure. Yes. And so where do you get the terracotta from?
The best place is to find a local potter with a kiln and have them make it for you. They have some things that come in and out on Amazon or eBay, that are like $100. It's 5 trays. But I buy those online. There's not like any made it's or Etsy might have it. So it's very it's never scaled.
So
Even though Chia,
they're reusable?
oh yeah, yeah, it's just it's clay. It's
Okay.
baked clay,
I think
unglazed.
it would be nice if you possibly could make a video on the chia and flax, how you do it, because it's different than all the other ones that are
Yeah, I
so
think that's
easy.
a really good point. Right now, like my mission, my personal legend is getting the message out of sprouting, and like anything that's deviating out of a jar right now is slowing things down for the adoption. Because what drives me is, on one hand, we have 25,000 people a day dying of starvation in the world. And on another hand, we have 100,000 people dying from basically what they're eating. So 4 times, a factor of 4 times more people are dying from chronic illnesses associated from what they ate, which is totally preventable. So that's what I want to really focus on. And so these niche things, like, I'm glad you're asking the questions and I'm happy to share, but my focus is really getting more people to consume more vegetables in the form of sprouts as my macro purpose.
Absolutely, and I'm right there with you, brother. Thank you. So I know you only got 2 more minutes, but so on the chia, doesn't it increase when you take the chia sprout or the flax sprout and you grow the sprout, however you grow it? You're saying that does not increase the ALA or any of the essential fatty
No,
acids?
no, I think there's a finite amount of ALA in there. What it does increase is the vitamin C, and it increases the soluble fiber, and it increases the other phytonutrients, and you're building antioxidants. Like, a standard chia and flaxseed does not have high levels of vitamin C or chlorophyll or any antioxidants because it's in the seed form. So it's only the metabolic process of the transformation of that seed into the vegetable, which is unleashing, those other compounds.
And when have you grown them in soil, the chia? Have
I
you
have,
experimented?
I have. And
Just
then you're eating above, and it's a whole process. Like, I love soil. What allowed me to sleep well at night without using soil on my sprouts was knowing that the seeds were taking the minerals from their main mother ship and embedding the minerals into them.
got you. Okay. What kind of soil do you suggest people use that are getting
I
their
would get an organic mix from, Home Depot or local potting things. It's a level, at best, if you can compost and make your own soil, that's the best. That's hard to do. So that's where it's so, as soon as I start to tell people to do anything outside of the jar, they end up failing. They end up getting discouraged. So I'm just trying to put guardrails. I don't want to control anyone, but I want to control my message so that we can get the highest results possible.
right? Two questions, then we're going to talk about your books, and then we'll be done. So, first question is about the soil, recycling it. When I take my mats, when I'm done, I put them in a recycle bin outside, and that's the only thing that's going in there is my soils. And then I break it up after about 6 months, and I've reused that. What's your opinion about that?
I think you should measure. Soil requires measuring the pH, measuring the minerals, and getting diagnostics, of it, because there's you don't want to use depleted soil. So you may need to enhance it or mix it, with other microbes.
Now, even when you get your soil mix from Home Depot or wherever, should you add more stuff to the soil or does it matter?
I'm mixing that with my compost, so I have natural, more living parts. But I think that for the simple thing, if you're getting fresh organic soil with the mix, and there's a whole level of science about the mixtures that they have, you can get good results without having to mix other things into it.
Yeah, somebody told me at a sprout that small, it doesn't make too much difference if the soil doesn't have anything added to it.
Correct.
Okay, so the last question is growing outside versus inside. I'm talking specifically about sunflower and wheatgrass. Have you experimented in growing outside?
Yeah, I grow my sunflower and I grow my wheatgrass outside, weather permitting. But I think that they will grow inside. You'll need lights to grow them. It depends how big that you want them to get. Like wheatgrass can become 7 inches, 9 inches tall, and sunflowers can continue to grow. It's very tricky. These are two um, vegetables that grow at various paces, depending on climate and humidity and soil and nutrients. So it's much more fun, but the results are more uncertain than sprouts in a jar, like with the basic sprouting kit from the sprouting company.
When you say weather permitting, do you mean the heat levels, the rain? What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah. If it's too cold, you get a frost. If you're in the Midwest in the winter, you're putting outside, you're going to get frost and you're just going to kill the plant.
What about too hot?
Too hot will also not grow. Some plants really love the sun. They grow towards the sun, but the moisture levels, the aridity, there's different climates. You have to be really careful. And sometimes if it is too hot, these plants that have not been stress tested to that environment will not grow. It takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years for plants to adjust to a certain climate.
When you grow outside, you don't need grow lights, right?
No, definitely not.
So when you're growing inside, how important are the grow lights versus just the natural light from the room?
For sprouts, not very important, right? Not necessary. But if you want to grow, full microgreens for 2 to 3 weeks, if they're not getting enough natural light by the window, they're not going to perform photosynthesis. So that's where you have to use the multi frequency grow light.
Does it make a difference if the sprouts you do in a jar are put in the dark or not? It doesn't. Does it or does not?
You only want to do in the dark, specifically is on the green peas, and that's for the antihistamine.
So everything else can be right on your counter. It don't have to go
Yeah.
in the dark.
Yeah, just you don't want direct sunlight, but daylight's fine for them. That
So
was a myth that I demissed. I did some myth busting on that one.
people that are doing the peas, whether they put it in the dark right away when it's soaking,
Yeah, they
or
put them in the dark or they wrap them in aluminum foil is a solid barrier for them.
for the whole time, like after they soak, or for the whole time, even so soaking.
The whole time.
So when you soak them in water, let it sit in dark.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
the whole time in the dark.
All right, Doug, you have an amazing book. We'll have another interview another time. Everybody, post your questions below. You have an amazing book. Tell everybody your website and how they can get in touch with you and how they can get your book.
Yeah, the book is available everywhere. The book, this past weekend, became the hit number one on Amazon for vegetarian books. It was really vegetarian diet books. It was a big thing here. Look at this. Can you see that?
Wow. There it is, number one.
Right on Amazon, which is number one in the world. So that was a big thing. But the book's on Amazon, and my company is thesproutingcompany.com, and I'm Doug Evans on Instagram and Doug Evans on TikTok.
One advantage, Doug, over growing vegetable greens in a garden outside is you can replant the seeds. You get seeds from the plant every year. You can reuse the same seeds. Anyway, in sprouting, you can make your own seeds, or you have to rely on companies to get.
I mean, unless you have a garden, unless you grow to seed, you could do that. That's a very specific process.
Okay.
So I mean, that could be a goal for someone, but I think originally they should stay grounded, stay focused.
Is there
You
one
know,
company you get your seeds from, or do you do various seeds?
thesproutingcompany.com.
Is that your company?
That's my company. Yeah.
Oh,
And we,
okay.
we,
So you
we
sell the
source,
seeds.
yeah, we source the seeds. They're US grown. They're tested for pathogens. They're tested for high germination rate. Um,
And that's what
they're
you
all,
use for your own seeds.
oh yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
just, I did all the work, and then I made sure we also have third party validation to make sure they're certified glyphosate free.
I'm glad I asked you this question because you're so humble. You're not pumping out, get seeds from here. And if I didn't ask you that, we wouldn't have known. So everybody, I'm going to put that link below. Get your seeds from Doug. He's tested all the other companies out there. Definitely get them at that link below. Doug, I know you got to run. We'll do it again. Thank you so much, man. And keep up the great work.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you so much, Paul. Have the
All right.
best night ever. Bye
You
bye,
too, buddy.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show.